Hey guys, this video covers two-dimensional arrays. So a 2D array is a table, effectively, or a matrix if we're going to use it to do calculations. When we say 2D array, I mean something like we could have, like say we had a 3 by 4 array where we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, 12. You know what? So this would be a two-dimensional array. We have 3 rows and 4 columns, and obviously, again, the use of this is to make tables, to track some stuff, and later on we'll use it to make a matrix and I think a vending machine. We'll see how that works. The proper declaration for an array list is you have a type like string, int, boolean. Later on, when we create our own objects, we can even use those. You have an array name. Again, that can be anything. I would name it whatever I was going to put in the 2D array. And on the right side of the declaration, we have new. And again, the type is exactly the same type that you put over here. So if you put string right here, you need to put string right here. And the first thing that you pass is the number of rows that your 2D array has. And then you have the number of columns. There are a couple of ways to fill in a two-dimensional array, and there are a couple of ways to print a two-dimensional array. We'll go over all of that. To be expedient with some of this stuff, I've already typed up the code that we're going to use. So we're going to jump over to Excel for a moment. So what we're going to print is a table that looks like this. It's not going to have all of the user interface that Excel has, but we're going to print in the first row, first, middle, last, and in the second row, we're going to print Kobe being Bryant. So back over in Eclipse, we have the declaration for our 2D array. It is names equals new. And again, the type string on this side matches the type string over here, and 2 rows and 3 columns. So remember, arrays are 0 indexed, and so are two-dimensional arrays. So that means that our rows start at 0 and our columns also start at 0. So if I want to print in the upper left cell for this array, I would have 0, 0 is going to be first, 0, 1 is going to be middle, and 0, 2 is going to be last. That corresponds to this being first being 0, 0, middle being 0, 1, last is 0, 2. And then my second row, Kobe is going to be 1, 0, Bean is going to be 1, 1, and Bryant is going to be 1, 2. So back over in Eclipse, so now we have all of this data put into our 2D array. Now, if we want to print this, there are 2 ways to do so. We're just going to write a method that does this so we don't have to mess up the main method. So we're going to have static. Since this is just going to do something, we're going to make a void method. So we're going to have static void, and we're going to call it print array. So static void print array. And since we want to print a two-dimensional array, we need to make our parameter a two-dimensional array. So we're going to have string. So we need 2 brackets, and we want to just call this, we'll just call it array. Close this out. And so now we need to actually print the array. So we're going to have a for loop that controls the rows. So we're going to have for int row equals 0. And row is going to be less than array dot length. And we're going to increment row by 1. Now, the reason that we use array dot length is, let's make a comment somewhere. We'll make a comment out here. The length of a 2D array is the number of rows. It's the number of rows that the 2D array contains. So now we're manipulating, when we make this inner loop, we will be manipulating, we'll be going through the row column by column. So now we need for int column equals 0. Now, again, this assumes you want to print everything in the array. So we're going to have for int column equals 0. And we need column to be less than, so the rows in the array are arrays themselves. So each row of an array, a 2D array, is its own array. So now we need column to be less than array row dot length, and we want to increment column by 1 as well. We're going to close that. Column plus plus, close this, and we're going to jump inside this. So now we're printing through row by row. So initially we're going to print all of row 0, and if we want a space after that, we're going to put outside of the second for loop, but inside the first one. But after the second for loop executes, we're going to put a print line statement so we get a new line. And inside the second for loop, we're just going to print, let's see, we want to print each thing. So we're going to have, what's the name of our array is array. We want to have row, and we want to print column. So this is going to print everything in row 0 first, then row is going to be 1, and then it's going to print everything in row 1. And after each row, we have a blank line. So when we see this and we press Control F11, we get, it's going to take a minute to run. Oh, I didn't actually do anything. So inside the main method, we actually need to print array, and we want to pass it our 2D array names, and we'll close that down. So now when we run this, we expect it to give us first, middle, last, Kobe Bean Bryant. So one thing that we're going to add to Java is sometimes we can format what we print. And since we're going to print tables, we would want to format that stuff so it looks decent. So the first thing that we can do back in our print method is I probably would want to separate each term with a space. But there's a couple of ways to do this. So right now, if we go back and run this again, we'll get first, middle, last. There is a print format function in Java where instead of print, we have printf. And when you do printf, you can pass it parameters. The last parameter is always what you actually want to print, but what precedes that is how you want to format stuff. We want to format a string that is padded to the left. So we're going to have open quotes, and inside the open quotes, we're going to put percent. We're going to put how far we want to space stuff. Now, general rule of thumb is however long the longest thing that you're printing, add 4 or 5 to that. So if middle is the longest word that we have, so we would want to have a space of about 10. So to do that, we're going to put in 10. We need to separate this with a comma. So what happens now is that the positive 10 means everything is right formatted with space, meaning that everything jumps to the right and space is in front of that. So get this left formatted, like if we run this right now, we'll get, what was the error? Array, row, column, unknown source, conversion. Oh, I didn't put an S, my bad. I forgot the S for string. Print. Oh, I'm all over the place. The 10 needs to go after the percent. And we're going to run this again. And so right now we see that we have all of this space in front of the word first, and the T and the E line up at the end, the E and the N, but it's nicely formatted in some way. But if we wanted this to be left formatted where everything is like left justified, like if we jump back over to Excel for a moment, we see that everything is left justified. The F and the K are lined up, M and the B and so forth. If we want that to happen, we need to put in a negative 10 instead. So now when we run this, we see this is lined up, everything's to the left, and we have this nice amount of space in between. And even if we take out this space that we put in initially, and we go back and run this, we still get this nice alignment where everything is aligned. And for 2D arrays, that's going to be one of the things that we want to include so that stuff looks nice. It's not necessary, but if you want it to be readable, it's a good thing to do. So now, one way we did this was we created a 2D array and we added the values ourselves. Now, obviously, if we're working with data, we have quicker ways of doing this. So what we're going to do is make a 2D integer array, and we're going to call it a multiplication table. And we're going to say that equals new int, and say we wanted to do the times tables up to, we'll say the first 20 integers. So we want to have 20 rows, and we can make it a square thing. We'll have 20 rows. You know what? Actually, we'll have 20 rows and 12 columns. So that's how we get this. So if we wanted to just fill this starting with 1, like 1 times 1 is 1, out to 1 times 12, and down to 20 times 1 is 20, and 20 times 12 is 240. The way we could do so is we would have for int. Now, if I were you, I would start using row and column for a 2D array. So I would have for int row equals 1. Row is less than, well, we can say less than or equal to 20, I guess. Less than or equal to 20. And we want to do row plus plus. And then we have our column. So we have for int column equals 1. Column is less than or equal to, we said 12. And we want to increment column by 1. And what do we want to put in each cell? We want to just multiply the row and the column position. So like if we're in row 1, we want 1 times column 1, 1 times column 2, 1 times column 3, and so forth. But remember, arrays are 0 indexed. So we need to do multiplication table. Now we're starting at 1, so we need to actually do row minus 1, column minus 1 equals, now we just want to do row times column. And so what this does is, now imagine again, row is 1. So we jump into this loop. So initially row is going to be 1. So we're going to put in something in column, in multiplication table, 0, and column is going to be 1. So we're going to get 0, column is going to increment to be 2. Then we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 out to position 11. So then we would probably, I mean, this is it for this, like this is going to put everything in. And so when we get out of this loop, let's see, this is inside the loop. And if we wanted to print this array, we're going to have print array. And since we said string array, we want to change it to just be an int array instead. And that's going to work out. We want to have print array, and we want to put in, what's the name of our array? Multiplication table, multi table, and close this down. So when we run this now, we'll see how, now the number's going to be pretty spread out because we have this minus 10. I would say that we could probably take this down to minus, if we want everything to be right justified, we can say like 5 instead. So we run this and see what we get. We get, let me drag this console up a bit. So we get this nice multiplication table where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way down to 20. And it's nicely formatted for us. And so like 2D arrays can store a lot of stuff. Later on, like I said, we can put our own objects in this. We can simulate a vending machine. We're going to do some stuff with matrices. But the basic syntax is we have type, double brackets, name of the array, same type, number of rows, number of columns. Now I said there are a couple of ways to print this. We can print this using a traditional for loop, or we can print this using an enhanced for loop. The enhanced for loop we'll just put inside the main method so you can see how the things relate to each other. So let's see. If we wanted to print this using an enhanced for loop, we're going to have for. And so the first, we still have to use 2 for loops, but we're going to have for int. But so this is going to control the rows, so it needs to be an array. So for an integer array, we're going to say factor that is in multiplication table. So the factor is going to be the row, and then we need to go through that row and go column by column. So then we're going to have for int. Now inside that row is just a bunch of integer values. So we need int. And we'll call this, we'll just say other factor. And the other factor is in the table factor. It's in the array factor. So we're referencing, when we say factor, we're referencing each row of the 2D array. And what we want to print is, we want to print just other factor. And we want again, if we want like a new line after that, we're going to do SYSO, control space. And so it seems like it's only going to print one thing, but what happens is it's automatically going to print the cell, and it's going to print the cell, not just that thing. It's going to print each value in that row. So when we run this, we still get, I got print line, so I want print. And you know what, we can still make this pretty. So we can print F, and we can have, or we do 5. So we'll have %5s and comma to separate, and that should work out. So now we get exactly the same thing that we did initially, but we used an enhanced for loop to do so. So again, for this enhanced for loop, you have for, the first thing is the row, which is an array itself. So for each array that's in this 2D array multiplication table, then control the row itself. And this other factor is each value that's in the row or array, and we're going to print that. And so when we run this, we print that. And so we get exactly the same thing as if we did, we just did print array and we had mult table. We would get exactly the same thing twice. When we run this, we literally get exactly the same thing, but they work exactly the same way. Now, if you're going to ever change a value of a 2D array, you have to use the old for loop, because the enhanced for loop like accesses a copy of the array, doesn't actually manipulate the values. So again, we can put anything we want into a 2-dimensional array, but we're going to start out using data. We'll do a bunch of stuff in class. So if you guys have questions, talk to me in class. The practice for this is not difficult, but it does require you to actually go through and write some stuff down. We'll get started in class. See you.